In the entire history of justice, there has never been a trial like this. Imagine the defendant. He is accused of perjury, of ambition, of illegally seizing power. But he will not speak in his own defense. He will not plead for his life, because he has been dead for 9 months. This is not a work of fiction. This is the true story of the Cadaver Synod. The day the Catholic Church in the heart of Rome dug up the rotting corpse of a former pope, dressed him in sacred robes, propped him on a throne, and put him on trial for his immortal soul. It is a story of political revenge so extreme, of religious madness so profound, that it stands as one of the most bizarre and grotesque events in human history. A moment when the Vicar of Christ declared war on a dead man, and the world watched in horror. We will take you inside the courtroom. We will show you the political intrigue that led to this madness. We will reveal the shocking verdict, the gruesome punishment, and the bloody aftermath that plunged the papacy into one of the darkest periods it has ever known. History is stranger, darker, and more insane than any fiction. We prove it every week. If you are ready to explore the most unbelievable true stories from the past, subscribe to Dark Chronicles and ring the bell. You are about to witness a trial that defies belief. To understand how a dead man could be put on trial, you have to understand the world he lived in. This was not the Rome of majestic basilicas and pious pilgrims. This was the Rome of the late 9th century, a city that had fallen from the heights of imperial glory into a cesspool of violence, corruption, and political chaos. The Carolingian Empire, which had once unified much of Western Europe under a single Christian crown, had collapsed into warring fragments. Italy was now a battleground of petty tyrants, ambitious dukes, and rival political families, all fighting for control of the ultimate prize, the papacy. This era is known to historians as the Saeculum Obscurum, the Dark Age, or more bluntly, the Pornocracy, the rule of the whores. The papal throne was not won through piety or wisdom. It was bought with gold, seized with armies, and secured with murder. Popes were not holy men chosen by God. They were puppets, installed by powerful Roman families like the Theophylacti and the Spoletos to serve their political ambitions. The papacy had become a commodity, a tool of power to be wielded by whoever could muster the most swords and the most gold. In this brutal world, the papacy was a revolving door of death. Between 872 and 904, a span of just 32 years, there were 22 popes. Think about that. 22 men claimed the throne of St. Peter in 3 decades. Many of them lasted only a few months, or even a few weeks before being imprisoned, blinded, poisoned, or assassinated by the next faction to seize power. The papal tiara was not a crown of glory. It was a death sentence. To become pope was to paint a target on your back and to wait for the inevitable knife in the dark. Into this viper's nest stepped a man named Formosus. His name, ironically, means handsome or beautiful in Latin. He was a brilliant, charismatic, and deeply ambitious churchman who had spent his entire life climbing the ladder of ecclesiastical power. As the Bishop of Porto, a position he had held for decades, he had been a major player in papal politics. He was a diplomat, a strategist, and a survivor. He had made powerful friends in the courts of Europe, and even more powerful enemies in the streets of Rome. He had been excommunicated by one pope for political intrigue, then rehabilitated by another. He was a man who played the game, and played it well. In 891, at the age of around 75, Formosus finally achieved his life's ambition. He was elected pope. But in the dark age of the papacy, reaching the top only made you the biggest target. Formosus's reign was a tightrope walk over a pit of snakes. He made a series of political moves that would seal his fate, even beyond the grave. Most fatally, he angered the powerful Spoleto family, one of the main factions controlling Rome, by crowning their rival, Arnulf of Carinthia, as Holy Roman Emperor. This was a direct slap in the face to the Spoletos, who had expected Formosus to support their candidate. He made enemies who would not forget and who would not forgive. In the world of 9th century Rome, that was a death sentence. In 896, after 5 turbulent years as pope, Formosus died. The official cause was likely old age or illness, though in that era, poison was always a possibility. He was buried with full honors in St. Peter's Basilica, and Rome moved on to the next pope, as it always did, or so it seemed. But in the twisted world of 9th century Rome, death was not the end. For Pope Formosus, it was only the beginning of his troubles. The Spoleto family had not forgotten, and they were about to exact a revenge so grotesque, so theatrical, that it would shock even the jaded citizens of Rome. 7 months after Formosus's death, a new pope sat on the throne, Stephen VI. He was a puppet of the Spoleto family, the very enemies Formosus had made. Stephen was a weak man, easily manipulated, and consumed by a personal hatred for Formosus. Why? Because Formosus had been the one to ordain Stephen as a bishop. And if Formosus's papacy could be declared invalid, then Stephen's own ordination would be invalid too. It was a theological paradox, but in the mind of Stephen VI, twisted by ambition and rage, it made perfect sense. The Spoleto family whispered in his ear, and they demanded revenge. A revenge so absolute, so theatrical, that it would echo through the ages. In January of 897, Pope Stephen VI gave the order that would define his papacy and damn his soul. The tomb of Pope Formosus was to be opened. His 9-month-old corpse was to be exhumed and brought to the Basilica of St. John Lateran, the Cathedral Church of Rome. He was going to be put on trial, not a symbolic trial, not a trial in absentia. A real trial, with the corpse physically present, dressed in papal robes and seated on a throne. It was an act of madness so profound that even the chroniclers of the time, who had seen countless atrocities, struggled to find words to describe it. Imagine the scene. The great Basilica of St. John Lateran, one of the holiest sites in Christendom, is filled with the bishops, cardinals, and nobles of Rome. They have been summoned to witness something unprecedented, something that defies all reason and decency. On the papal throne, propped up by attendants who struggle to keep it upright, sits the defendant, the 9-month-old, decaying, discolored corpse of Formosus, dressed in the full, magnificent vestments of his former office. The white and gold robes hang loosely on the skeletal frame. The face is sunken, the skin mottled in gray. The eyes are closed, the jaw hangs slightly open. The stench of rot fills the sacred hall, overpowering even the incense that the priests desperately burn to mask it. On another throne, elevated above the corpse, sits the prosecutor, judge, and jury, Pope Stephen VI, his face a mask of fury and righteous indignation. He is dressed in his own papal vestments, a living mirror of the dead man before him. The trial begins, but the defendant naturally cannot speak. So a young deacon, trembling with fear and disgust, is appointed to hide behind the throne and answer the questions for the corpse. His voice, barely audible, is the only defense the dead pope will have. It is a farce, a grotesque puppet show, but it is being conducted with all the solemnity of a real trial. Stephen VI rises from his throne and screams at the corpse. "When you were Bishop of Porto," he bellows, his voice echoing through the basilica, "why did you usurp the universal Roman see in such a spirit of ambition?" He accuses the dead man of perjury, of violating canon law by moving from one diocese to another without permission, of illegally seizing the papacy through deceit and manipulation. He demands answers. The deacon, speaking for the corpse, offers weak defenses, but they are drowned out by Stephen's rage. For hours, this grotesque charade continues. A living pope, consumed by hatred and political calculation, interrogating a dead pope, whose silent, rotting presence is a mockery of the entire proceeding. The court watches in stunned silence. Some are horrified, some are fascinated, some are simply numb, having seen too much madness in this dark age to be shocked anymore. This is not justice. This is not even revenge. This is madness, given a throne and a crown, and dressed in the robes of the church. This is the kind of story you won't find in history books. This is the dark, hidden, and often insane side of the past. If you crave these forgotten stories, make sure you are subscribed to Dark Chronicles. We go where the history books are afraid to look. The verdict was never in doubt. Pope Formosus was found guilty, on all charges, guilty of perjury, guilty of violating canon law, guilty of usurping the papacy. The dead man was condemned by the living. But what do you do with a criminal who is already dead? How do you punish someone who is beyond pain, beyond fear, beyond earthly consequences? The punishment had to be as grotesque as the trial. It had to be a spectacle, a message, a warning to anyone who dared to cross the Spoleto family. First, the corpse was stripped of its sacred papal vestments. The guards tore the robes from its decaying body, ripping the fabric, exposing the rotting flesh beneath. It was a symbolic removal of its holy office, a public humiliation. He was declared a layman, a nobody, a fraud who had never been pope at all. Every act he had performed, every blessing he had given, every priest he had ordained, was declared null and void. It was as if his entire papacy had been erased from history. Then, Pope Stephen VI, in a fit of rage that shocked even the hardened witnesses, ordered the guards to seize the corpse and bring it to him. He took a knife and personally hacked off the 3 fingers of Formosus's right hand. The index finger, the middle finger, and the ring finger. The 3 fingers he had used to give blessings. The 3 fingers that had consecrated Stephen himself as a bishop. It was a symbolic castration of his spiritual power, a mutilation that went beyond the physical. Stephen was not just destroying a body, he was destroying a legacy, a memory, a soul. But the humiliation was not over. The mutilated corpse was dragged from the basilica and buried in a common graveyard for foreigners. Even that was not enough. Stephen, still consumed by his vendetta, had the body dug up again. This time, it was tied to heavy weights and thrown into the Tiber River, the ultimate disgrace, a burial fit only for the worst criminals. As the body of the dead pope sank into the muddy waters, Stephen VI must have believed he had won. He had not just defeated his enemy, he had erased him from history. He had declared all of Formosus's acts, all of his ordinations, null and void. He had wiped him from the memory of the church. But he had made a fatal miscalculation. He had forgotten about the people of Rome, and he had forgotten about the river. The Cadaver Synod had been too much. Even for the battle-hardened, cynical people of Rome, who had seen popes murdered, emperors deposed, and churches desecrated, this spectacle had crossed a line. It was a blasphemy that offended their deepest sense of piety and decency. It was one thing to kill a pope. It was quite another to put his corpse on trial, to mutilate his body, and to throw it in the river like a common criminal. The city began to simmer with rage. The people whispered in the streets, in the markets, in the churches. They said that Stephen VI had gone mad. They said that God would punish him. They said that the dead pope would have his revenge. And then, the river gave up its dead. Formosus's mutilated body, freed from its weights by the current or by divine intervention, washed up on the banks of the Tiber. A monk, walking along the river at dawn, found it tangled in the reeds. He recognized the papal robes, even though they were torn and waterlogged. He recognized the mutilated hand. According to the chronicles of the time, a rumor spread like wildfire through the city. The dead pope's waterlogged corpse was performing miracles. The sick who touched it were being healed. The blind who prayed before it could see. The river had rejected the sacrilege, and God himself was showing his favor for the condemned pope. Whether these miracles were real or simply the product of mass hysteria and political manipulation, we will never know. But in that moment, in that city, they were believed. This was all the people needed. The simmering rage exploded into a full-blown uprising. The citizens of Rome, armed with clubs and torches, stormed the Lateran Palace, screaming for Stephen VI's blood. The hunter had become the hunted. The man who had put a corpse on trial was now running for his life. Stephen's powerful patrons, the Spoleto family, abandoned him to the mob. He was deposed, stripped of his papal authority, and thrown into a dungeon. In July of 897, just 6 months after his grotesque trial, he was strangled to death in his cell. The man who had put a corpse on trial had become a corpse himself. The revenge of Pope Formosus was complete, but the chaos was far from over. The Cadaver Synod had created a legal and theological black hole. If Formosus's acts were null and void, then all the priests and bishops he had ordained were illegitimate, including Stephen VI himself. which meant Stephen was never a valid pope, which meant the Cadaver Synod itself was legally meaningless. It was a paradox that threatened to tear the church apart. History is full of these tangled knots and paradoxes. We love to untangle them. If you enjoy deep dives that challenge your thinking, click that subscribe button. You belong here at Dark Chronicles. The popes who followed Stephen VI were left with an impossible mess to clean up. The Cadaver Synod had created a legal and theological nightmare. If Formosus was never a valid pope, then all the priests and bishops he had ordained were not valid either, which meant that all the sacraments they had performed were invalid, which meant that thousands of Christians across Europe had not been properly baptized, married, or given last rites. The entire structure of the church was threatened. Something had to be done. In December of 897, Pope Theodore II, who reigned for only 20 days before dying himself, convened a new synod. He officially annulled the Cadaver Synod. He rehabilitated Formosus, declaring that he had been a legitimate pope and that all his acts were valid. And he ordered that the body, which had been recovered from the Tiber by a monk and kept in a secret location, be reburied in St. Peter's Basilica with full pontifical honors. It was a symbolic restoration, an attempt to undo the madness. The next year, Pope John IX went even further. He convened 2 more synods, one in Rome and another in Ravenna, which confirmed the previous ruling. He ordered all documents, all acta, from the Cadaver Synod to be destroyed. Every record, every transcript, every piece of evidence was to be burned. He excommunicated the 7 cardinals who had participated in the madness, branding them as heretics and enemies of the church. And most importantly, he passed a new law, a law born from this very horror. It was now forbidden, for all time, to put a dead person on trial. The Cadaver Synod would be the first and the last of its kind. The church tried to erase its own insanity. It tried to burn the records, to bury the memory, to pretend the Cadaver Synod had never happened. But you cannot erase an event so monstrous. It survived in the chronicles of horrified monks like Liutprand of Cremona, who wrote about it decades later with a mixture of fascination and disgust. It survived in the whispers of the Roman people, who passed the story down through generations. It survived in the dark legends of the papacy, a cautionary tale about the dangers of power unchecked by reason or morality. It became a permanent stain on the history of the church, a testament to the depths of depravity to which power can sink. The Cadaver Synod is more than just a bizarre footnote in history. It is a terrifying case study in the pathology of power. It shows what can happen when political ambition, personal hatred, and religious authority combine to create a perfect storm of madness. It reveals a fundamental truth, that our institutions, even the most sacred ones, are only as sane and as moral as the human beings who run them. And when those human beings are driven by vengeance and a lust for power, they can twist the most holy of offices into a theater of the absurd and the grotesque. The story of the Pope who put a corpse on trial is a warning. It's a warning that no institution is immune to corruption. It's a warning that dogma can be weaponized. And it's a warning that the dead are never truly gone, especially when the living still have scores to settle. There are countless stories like this, buried in the darkest corners of the past, waiting to be unearthed. We are the ones who dig them up. If you believe these stories must be told, if you believe that we must confront the madness of our own history to understand ourselves, then do the one thing that allows us to continue this mission. Subscribe to Dark Chronicles. The darkness is waiting.